So the final thing that we want to talk about is ways that we can actually speed up our code. Obviously, having your code be as small and as optimal as possible is going to affect the load time of your site. So you want to try to do as much as you can to ensure that your site loads in a very quick and speedy manner. So there's a few other things that we can do. As we've gone through and we have optimize this code, we've done a lot of things to improve how this page is going to load. It certainly is going to be faster than what we started with. One of the easiest ways that you can speed up your code is you can actually go through and take inventory of any unnecessary line breaks that might be present in your code and simply remove the line breaks. So here we have some extra line breaks, and before I start, I just wanted to point out that I took the style that we've been working with that's called style.css, and now I'm going to further compress and speed up my code. So I've actually made a copy of the file called style mini. Now that I know that my styles are pretty much set and I just want to speed up the code, it's a good idea to make a copy of the code that contains all the comments, because once we speed up our code, and we're going to go through a process called minification, once we minify our file, the file is going to be very hard to edit, and it's going to be very difficult for us to see all of our nice indentations and line breaks. So you definitely want to make a copy of your file prior to doing this, so you can always go back and use that file if you want to base any changes off of it. So I have my main style, which is just called style.css. I have an identical style called style mini, which we're going to be using for this minification process. So as I was saying, I would go through and I would just remove any unnecessary line breaks. So those are easy enough to go through and just kind of eliminate any of those, and you would just comb through your code and do that. You also want to condense single line declarations to just one line. We've already done that. If there's multiple lines, then I suggest just leaving it, but definitely remove any unnecessary empty line breaks. You want to shrink that down as much as possible so that your browser has less to parse, which is going to make it faster on the page load time and make it a better experience for your end user. So at the end of the day, you really want to go through, take inventory of your CSS, see what types of unnecessary line breaks you can remove. The other thing that you want to do is kind of another housekeeping chore, but you want to simplify your comments. Now, I know I've been kind of harping on you to be sort of a comment fiend and go through and comment everything that you need to and make it really easy for anyone to come into your code and see what's going on. This is a great thing to do during the development process and also when you're working with other people. But when we go to ship this thing, when we go to push it out to the web, chances are we can actually go in and eliminate some of the unnecessary comments. And you can also reduce the comments so that they're smaller sizes and they're more readable and they process faster in the browser. So I could go through and I could remove any unnecessary comments. So I probably don't need this HTML display role reset for older browsers. So I'd really want to go through and eliminate some of these. I might decide that I don't need 2 lines of asterisks. Maybe just 1 line of asterisks is going to be fine for a separator, but I would essentially comb through my code and get rid of stuff that I could. Anywhere that I can make my CSS shorter is going to make it work a little bit faster. Now, this isn't going to cut down on your load times in a significant amount, but it's just going to make it that much faster. And eliminating just unnecessary comments is going to make your file look cleaner as well. So you might want to just shrink down long, verbose comments just to ensure that your code is nice and clean and tidy and also loads as fast as possible. The next thing you can do, which is something we've already done, is remove any unused selectors. So another great way to make sure that your CSS is as clean and tidy and as fast as it needs to be is to remove any unused selectors. So if you have a pretty long CSS document, it might be a little bit difficult to find unused selectors. So unused selectors are where you have a class and that class isn't being applied to anything, or sometimes you might just have a selector and you thought that you were going to use it and you just kind of left some empty brackets. This again is an unused selector. It might look like this. So what that means is I just didn't define it, or I defined it somewhere else, or it's with a selector group, or never got fully developed, or whatever. But you just want to eliminate those things whenever possible. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is ways that we can minify our CSS. So one of the best ways to speed up the CSS code is to do something called minifying the CSS. Minifying is where you've taken the CSS code that you've written and you put it into some sort of minification or compression engine, and then the CSS is compressed. All the unnecessary line breaks, the comments, everything's stripped out, and it just is going to become a big block of matrix looking code. And it, kind of as a little fact, a recent survey of top US websites, the CSS minification process actually achieved about a 20% size reduction on all CSS files that were rendered through minification. So this can allow for the website to load about 80% faster, which is pretty substantial. That's pretty crazy if you can decrease the bandwidth usage for your users in such a manner. So minification is a great thing that you're going to want to do, but please note that when you minify, you only want to perform this once the website is ready to go live or go to production, because you don't want to try to ever edit a minified CSS document. It would be a nightmare. You also, as I mentioned before, you want to save a local version of the unminified CSS so you can easily edit the CSS and minify it again later if you need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this file, I'm going to compress it, I'm going to show you how we can minify it. And the easiest way to do this is to use one of the online tools. I have a couple that I use quite often. The first one is called Css Minify Err, and you just input your CSS and then it's going to show you the output CSS. You can just copy paste or you can download as a file, so it's really easy to get the information. We're going to go into our CSS. I'm going to select everything, so I'm just doing a select all, and I'm going to copy, and I'll go into the browser and I'm going to paste in my CSS under the input CSS. So you can see here I have all my comments, I have everything. I'm going to click minify, and it's going to minify this. So you can see that this is just one long block of CSS. And if I copy this code and we come into brackets and I delete everything and I paste it in, you can see that my code is now really condensed. It's obviously kind of a nightmare to edit, but this is the same code as what we have right here. But you can see it's just one big block of code with no line breaks, no indentations, no comments, nothing. It's just the raw code. But this is going to be a huge reduction in what we have going on. And actually we can see exactly how much more information there is by using another minifying tool. This one is called Css Compressor, and this one is actually my favorite one because it compresses your code and it gives you information as to exactly how much you've compressed, so it's really rewarding. So I'm just going to paste my code in again. I'll need to go back and get the unminified version, so I'm just going to do undo. I'm going to select everything and copy it, and I'll come back into the browser. I'm going to paste in the code, and I'm just using the default settings. I'm just going to click compress. It's going to compress, and it shows me right here what happened. I input 5,143 bytes. My output is 1,933 bytes, so I cut it down substantially. I'm saving 166%. So again, if I just select all of this and copy it and go back into my editor and delete what's there and paste, I get the exact same thing. I mean, it's pretty much just showing me the exact same code, much smaller though. So if I was to save my file, the size of my minified file is about half of the original. So if I want to use the minified file, I need to go into my HTML, and instead of pointing to style.css, I'm going to point to style mini, which is the name of my minified file. I'm going to save, and if we go back out to the browser and we refresh the page doesn't look any different. Code is exactly the same. It's just been compressed down to a very optimized, stripped down version of the code. So this is a great tool to use. And in the CSS Compressor, if you go to the advanced options, you have other things that you can choose. So you can compress colors, you can compress font weights, remove unnecessary black slashes, remove last semicolons. You don't actually need the last semicolon. You need all of them up until the last one. You can discard invalid properties. You can choose all of these things. What you want to have happen with shorthands, yes, but common ones only, or yes to all. Whatever you won't decide that you want to do, you can choose to do that. And once I make some changes, I can recompress, and you can see that this one gave me a slightly better result. So I had 166 before, now it's 168 because I chose to optimize all shorthands. So needless to say, excellent tool to use, and that should save a considerable amount off of your CSS. The only bad part about minifying is chances are you're going to forget to save your original file, and you're going to end up saving over the original file, and you're going to end up with this, which is going to be much harder for you to make changes to later on. So just take this as a warning. Make sure that you always make a copy of your CSS file with all of the comments and all the indentation and all the good stuff present, because when you end up with this big block of thick, dense code, it's really hard to be able to make edits to it. And there is no unminification process. So once you do this, if you save the file and close it, you're pretty much out of luck. So just make sure that you make that backup copy with all of the comments and goodness in there, because if I put this out on the web, this file is going to be way more optimized, but at some point, which will inevitably happen, if somebody says, hey, I need you to make a change to the website, I definitely want to be working off of this file, not this file. So that's a way that you can easily speed up your page and make it load even faster. So hopefully through this series of lectures you learned some great ways to structure your CSS, make it a little bit easier to organize all of the information that you have within your page, and you've learned some ways that you can speed up the rendering process of the code. When you work on large projects where you have thousands of lines of CSS, this organization process is really helpful to have. It's even helpful on smaller sites like this, but it definitely makes a huge difference. Anyways, good luck to you, and I hope that your CSS is optimized and fast.